Good afternoon, dear participants, or in whichever time zone you are. A warm welcome to our second webinar of the WiN Global Group of Experts, WiN for Peace. I'm very happy to see many participants here today, and I'm sure many more will still join because about 100 of you have registered to participate. So today we will speak about safeguards. So safeguards at the national, regional, and the international level. And before doing so, let me first of all introduce you to how we will conduct this session. And let me share my screen because it's in my presentation. So I hope all of you can see my screen. So as I've said, this is our second webinar on WiN for Peace, and it will cover all aspects of safeguards, national, regional, and international. First of all, I will give you a brief introduction of WiN for Peace for those of you who have not attended previously. Then I will talk about the fundamentals of IAEA safeguards and the activities of IAEA safeguards inspectors. So what inspectors do when they go out for verification activities in the field. Then we will have the Secretary of ABAC, Ms. Elena Maceras, to speak about regional safeguards, in particular ABAC, and some aspects of the bilateral and quadripartite agreements. Then Ms. Agostina Serrano will talk about national safeguards, and Ms. Ana Rita Lopez Ramos about Euratom safeguards. We will then have a question and answer session, and very important, we will also have a quiz. So I encourage all of you to pay attention to what we are saying, because there will be a quiz at the end of this webinar. So without any further ado, I think most of you know who we are. We are the WiN Global Group of Experts, Women in Peace. We currently have about 16 members. I am the leader currently, and we have two supporters, the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation and the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs at Vienna. Let me briefly tell you more about myself. So I have two master degrees, one in business administration in trade sciences, and one in nuclear science from the University of Manchester. I have worked at the IAEA for about 35 years, 20 years thereof in the Department of Safeguards, first as an information analyst and then as a nuclear safeguards inspector. And until 3 weeks ago, I was a senior nuclear export control specialist in Abu Dhabi at the Federal Authority for Nuclear Regulation, FUNR. I'm also on the WiN Global Steering Committee as the WiN Global Treasurer, and I'm the leader of this group. And I was also the WiN IAEA president from 2009 to 2016. So our objectives are to promote activities, training, and collaboration in 4 main areas, which are related to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, to nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear safeguards, nuclear export controls, and nuclear disarmament, with the objective to increase the number of female professionals in this field, which I think will further world peace. Our activities are to promote the exclusively peaceful use of nuclear energy. We conduct regular meetings and events to discuss relevant topics. We conduct educational and training sessions, such as this one. And we cooperate with different entities like the IAEA, the UNODA, the VCDNP, the INMM, the Atomic Reporters, and the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And all our events are open to WiN Global members. Let me give you a brief overview of our activities for this year. So we have already conducted a webinar, which was also the inauguration ceremony, where I gave an overview of the foundations of the international non-proliferation regime. Today we will talk about safeguards basics. In about a month's time, we will have a look at Iran's nuclear program and why it is of concern. Then at the beginning of June, we will look at the basic concepts of export controls. In July, we plan to have a talk on A.Q. Khan, who he was and what was his impact on nuclear non-proliferation. In late August or early September, we will have a talk on disarmament, on the concepts and the current status. And in October, we will have a session by the VCDMP, what it is and what it does. And we have unscheduled sessions for AUKUS, the TPNW and ICANN, how to safeguard small modular reactors, and some non-technical sessions on sharing of career experiences and how to manage work-life balance. So this is my short introduction. And now let's look at the fundamentals of IAEA safeguards. So I just recalled one of the slides from my last talk, which are the main NPT provisions related to this session. So one is Article 1 and 2 of the NPT, and the other one is Article 3. And let's look more in detail. So the main requirements for non-nuclear weapon states are that they should not proliferate, so they should not acquire nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices, and that they have some safeguards obligations. First of all, they need to accept safeguards on all source or special fissionable material in the state. And secondly, they need to conclude a comprehensive safeguards agreement with the IAEA. So let's look at that a little bit in more detail. So they have to accept safeguards on all source of special fissionable material. But what is this material? Actually, it's defined in the IAEA statutes. So source material is considered uranium in its natural or depleted form and thorium. And special fissionable material is considered plutonium-239, uranium-233, and uranium enriched in the isotopes 235 or 233. So you can imagine a source material is the material that leads to special fissionable material. So for example, natural uranium, if you enrich it, you get special fissionable enriched U-235. If you irradiate depleted uranium in a reactor, you get plutonium. And if you irradiate thorium, you get uranium-233. So that's why it's called source material. It's important for you to note that any other radioactive material, there's a lot of it, lots of different isotopes and elements. They are not subject to IAEA safeguards, but they may be subject to national and international control and monitoring measures. For the IAEA, only uranium, plutonium, and thorium are safeguarded material. So the other provision is that states need to conclude a comprehensive safeguards agreement with the IAEA, the so-called CSA, and you can see the model in Circ 153 on the right-hand side, the blue book, which is concluded between a non-nuclear weapon state and the IAEA. And that booklet contains the main provisions for the application of IAEA safeguards. At this point, I would also like to mention a special provision for how the CSA was applied to countries with minimal nuclear activities between 1974 and 2006. It was the so-called original small quantities protocol. It was made available to states with minimal or no nuclear material in the state and with no nuclear facility. Most IAEA verification activities were held in abeyance. For example, no requirement to report anything to the IAEA or to have any inspectors coming to that country. But of course, this posed a challenge to the IAEA's ability to draw a credible safeguards conclusion for those states, because the IAEA never went there and didn't really know what was going on there. And the IAEA is required to draw these safeguards conclusions annually in the safeguards implementation report. So the IAEA was not feeling very confident about drawing these conclusions about countries they did not inspect. That is why in 2006 they modified the SQP, and the modified SQP reinstates the implementation of some safeguards requirements. For example, states do need to submit an initial report of nuclear material in the state and there are also IAEA safeguards inspections. As of the end of last year, there were 108 states with an SQP. So more than half of the states in the world have a so-called SQP, and 23 out of them still needed to modify their SQPs to the new standard. So what are IAEA safeguards? In paragraph 1 of INSERC 153, nuclear weapon states need to undertake to accept safeguards on all source of special fissionable material. We have already looked at what that is. In all peaceful nuclear activities within its territory, under its jurisdiction, or carried out under its control anywhere, for the exclusive purpose to verify that such material is not diverted to nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices. So in summary, one can say that IAEA safeguards are a set of technical measures applied on nuclear material and activities through which the IAEA seeks to verify that there is no misuse of nuclear technology on the one hand, and on the other hand, no diversion of nuclear material from peaceful purposes, from peaceful uses. So what are the obligations of states under their CSAs? First of all, they need to establish a state system of accounting for and control of nuclear material, the so-called SSAC, and Agostina will tell us more about that in her presentation. They also need to provide some information to the IAEA, so information on nuclear material on the territory and on the nuclear facilities. They need to allow access by the IAEA and support that access. And in general, those states need to cooperate with the IAEA in the implementation of safeguards. What is the objective of IAEA safeguards? As per paragraph 28 of INSERC 153, this objective is the timely detection of diversion of significant quantities of nuclear material, either to the manufacture of nuclear weapons or of other nuclear explosive devices, or for purposes unknown, and the deterrence of diversion by risk of early detection. So if you look at this, you will see that the IAEA cannot prevent the diversion, but its objective is to detect the diversion at an early stage, to detect the diversion of significant quantities, and also it's meant to be a deterrence against such diversion, because states will know that the IAEA is able to detect any diversion measures. So let's look how nuclear material can be diverted. So there are basically two ways. One is that the state could use declared nuclear material or facilities for prescribed purposes. Or the other possibility is to use undeclared nuclear material or facilities for prescribed purposes. So one is the official program and the state takes away some material. Or the other option is to make a clandestine facility and to produce nuclear material in a clandestine manner. Let's now look at the concept of significant quantities, the so-called SQ. So the IAEA defines it as the approximate amount of nuclear material for which the possibility of manufacturing a nuclear explosive device cannot be excluded. It's important not to confuse an SQ with the critical mass. The critical mass is the smallest amount of fissile material that is needed for a sustained nuclear chain reaction. Whereas the SQP, the SQ also takes into account losses due to conversion and manufacturing processes. The IAEA uses the SQ concept for establishing the quantity component of the IAEA inspection goal. So the more significant quantities there are at the facility, the more verification measures the IAEA will put in place. Let's look at the quantities of what we are talking about here when we look at significant quantity. So the IAEA many decades ago calculated the significant quantity of plutonium and uranium-233 as 8 kilograms. Uranium enriched above 20% is considered highly enriched uranium, and it's considered the significant quantity is considered to be 25 kg. And for low enriched uranium, which is below 20% enrichment, it's 75 kg. Natural uranium, it's 10 tons, and thorium or depleted uranium is 20 tons. So you can see that it's quite a lot of natural and thorium and depleted uranium. But of course, there have been criticism about whether this is still adequate, these significant quantities, and actually the real quantities may be quite smaller. What are some of the limitations of IAEA safeguards under the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement? And I briefly mentioned this last time already. So first of all, there's a limited routine access, both in terms of frequency and in terms of locations. So the standard inspections are clearly scheduled at certain intervals, and the IAEA inspectors may only go to certain locations where the nuclear material is declared to be present. And the main focus of the CSA is on declared nuclear material, so on the correctness of the declarations, but there is not really much how should I say, attention to the completeness aspect. So the CSA is not very well able to provide assurances on the absence of undeclared nuclear material or facilities. And this came to the light in 1991 in the case of Iraq. So at that time, the declaration of Iraq did not match what Iraq was actually doing. And on the right-hand side, you can see a depiction of the Tuwesa nuclear site near Baghdad. At that time, it housed a 5 megawatt thermal research reactor, which was under IAEA safeguards. And in the green ring, that's where the IAEA had access to. But if you look at all the red boxes, there were some activities going on there related to enrichment, reprocessing, and weaponization. And the IAEA had no idea that that was going on the same site, just because they simply didn't have access there under the CSA. This was a wake-up call for the IAEA and led to the so-called strengthening of IAEA safeguards, where the IAEA was looking at which processes can be improved, which additional tools does the IAEA need. And they all came together in the so-called additional protocol. On the right-hand side, you will see the model of that protocol, which is published on the IAEA website as INTSERC 540. And under the additional protocol, the IAEA has enhanced access and more short notice access. And the states also need to provide much more information on their nuclear activities, not just on those involving nuclear material, but which are related to the nuclear fuel cycle. And the AP aims to enable the IAEA to provide assurances both about the declared and the potentially undeclared activities, and to get a more complete picture of what is going on in the state's nuclear program. So the AP is an important tool to enable the IAEA to have this completeness picture of state declarations. So for a state that has both the CSA and the AP in force, it covers both the aspects of correctness and completeness. Now let's look at what IAEA safeguards inspectors do when they go out in the field and do their verification activities based on the CSA and some other procedures and protocols. There are basically 3 types of IAEA verifications. One are inspections. Second, we have so-called design information verification visits, or DIVs. And thirdly, we have complementary access, or CA, under the additional protocol. Let's first look at inspections. So, as I have said, states need to submit declarations on nuclear material present at facilities in the state, so nuclear material accounting reports. And then the IAEA inspections are independent verifications of the state's declarations. The objective is, as we know, the detection of diversion of declared nuclear material for prescribed purposes. So if an inspector, let me go back. If you look at the picture on the right-hand side, you can see that the IAEA inspectors always carry a lot of equipment around the world, so that can really be quite tedious to have boxes and boxes of equipment in addition to the suitcases. So once inspectors come to a facility, first of all, they look at the nuclear material accounting, and they do carry out a book audit and look at the facility records. So there are the source documents, which are the facility records. Then there is an itemized list of all nuclear material present at the facility at the time of the inspection. Then there's the general ledger, where the accounts of each nuclear material category are summarized and all the inventory changes. And those are then the basis for the state reports that are submitted to the IAEA. This activity is then the basis for establishing a sampling plan for the verification of items by the inspectors. Another activity is so-called item counting and tag check. So here on the left picture, you can see a large number of UF6 cylinders. During the inspection, at the beginning of the inspection, the inspectors get the itemized list. So the itemized list should contain all those cylinders at the facility, and the inspectors first of all count those cylinders or any other items. And on the right-hand side, you see a picture, your photo with an engraved plug on the UF6 cylinder. That's the so-called tag check. So each UF6 cylinder should be uniquely identifiable in the itemized list. So this is what the inspectors do as the first check. In the case of large quantities of nuclear material, like here for UF6 cylinders, the inspectors also need to weigh the nuclear material to determine the mass of the nuclear material. And here they use so-called load cells, which are calibrated, equipment calibrated by the IAEA. Then very important, so-called containment and surveillance. So containment are the IAEA seals, which are used to maintain the continuity of knowledge. And here you see different types of seals. In the left-hand picture, you see metal seals, which are attached to a nuclear item. On the right-hand side, you see the successor, which is the new version of the metal seal. And at the bottom, an electronic seal, a so-called EOS seal. So, for example, if inspectors go to a facility and there are 10 items there, and they verify all 10 items, and then they seal those items so that no nuclear material can be removed from the cylinder or from the container. Next time, during the next inspection, they don't need to re-verify them, because if the seal has not been tampered with, the continuity of knowledge has been maintained, and there is no need to re-verify it at the next inspection, but maybe at once a year or whatever are the requirements. So that's the concept of continuity of knowledge. On the right-hand side, you see surveillance equipment. So here you see a new IAEA camera, both from the outside and from the inside, what it looks like when you open it up. There are some SD cards which capture the pictures, and you can set the timing between the taking of the pictures. And some states allow the transmittal of those surveillance data to the IAEA via so-called remote monitoring. And at the bottom, you see the IAEA DG Rafael Grossi showing one of those cameras during a press conference related to Iran, which we may hear about next time. Another important activity is NDA measurements, non-destructive assay measurements. So basically the IAEA measures gamma and neutrons, and they have a whole array of instruments for gamma detectors and neutron detectors, and also alpha and beta, but those are not used as much as gamma and neutron. This picture shows a spent fuel pond. Of course, you know, in spent fuel, the main material of safeguards relevance is plutonium. And that's why the IAEA pays a lot of attention to spent fuel in the spent fuel pond. And there is a so-called Cherenkov viewing device that the IAEA uses. In the past, it was like a camera where inspectors had to stand on top of the pool and look at each individual fuel assembly. But now they have developed a new system, which is a robotized Cherenkov viewing device, which allows for automatic verification of the spent fuel pond. For bulk handling facilities, so facilities where nuclear material is present in bulk form, inspectors also take samples to conduct destructive analysis to determine the nuclear material content and the isotopic composition in those samples. So on the left-hand side, you see small samples which are used for powder, for example, or for pellets. And in the right-hand side, you can see some UF6 sampling devices. A very important tool for the IAEA is so-called environmental sampling, which allows for the verification of the current and also past nuclear activities by analyzing swipe samples taken at declared facilities and elsewhere in the state. So the first picture on the left is a sampling kit, which consists of a couple of cotton swipes on the bottom right-hand corner. Then there's a working paper, then there are gloves and a pen and some pre-inspection kits, those small the small white square above the gloves, which inspectors need to apply before they go into the nuclear facility. Then there are basically the inspection team splits into two. So there's a dirty inspector and the clean inspector. The clean inspector then takes those cotton swipes and swipes the surfaces in a nuclear facility where it's likely that some signatures of past or present activities are contained, for example, the piping or the hot cells or whatever that may be. So the clean person takes those swipes and the dirty person collects them and bags them. They put them in the bags and they attach a unique identification to them. Then the inspectors take them back to the IAEA, and those samples are distributed to so-called analytical laboratories. There's one at the IAEA, where the IAEA uses mass spectrometers and other equipment to analyze those samples for particles and to determine whether the state declaration is correct or not. And by the way, on this picture, for those of you who know Naida Ziga, that's Naida working in the IAEA Safeguards Analytical Laboratory a few years ago. So that's environmental sampling. And now we come to the design information verification DIV visits. So the objective of the DIV is to detect any changes in the facility design or operation. And the DIVs are performed throughout the lifetime of the facility to ensure that the facility is being used as declared, and also to determine whether the safeguards measures are still adequate in case there is a new facility is under construction or there are some changes to the facility. On the left, in the left picture, you see the design information questionnaire, which all states need to fill out for each facility in the state. Which is kept under very confidential measures by the IAEA and which forms the basis of the design information verification visit. So they have to provide a lot of information there. And on the right-hand side, you see a DIV training activity at the research reactor. Last not least, let's look at the complementary access under the additional protocol. As I have said before, the focus of complementary access and of the additional protocol in general is the detection of any undeclared nuclear material or activities. And the IAEA can trigger a complementary access in two ways. If IAEA inspectors are already on a nuclear site, they can just present the notification to the state authority, and within 2 hours, they need to be granted access to anywhere on the site. If they are still not on the site, the state needs to grant access within 24 hours. So inspectors can go anywhere on a declared site and also beyond if they have announced it. And they can use different types of instruments, radiation detection devices. They can also take photographs, and environmental samples, of course, are very important. So these are the verification activities, and the job of an EA inspectors can be rather tough. Here you see me on a picture on my first inspection to Iran in 2007, and I had to dress up like this. This was just before going to the facility. But it can also be fun. So this is an inspection in Egypt, also in 2007. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. And I would now like to hand over to Ms. Elena Maceiras from ABAC, who will speak to us about regional safeguards. So let me stop sharing and let me introduce Elena. So Elena holds a degree in physical sciences from the Faculty of Exact and Natural Sciences in the UBA from 1975. And since 1918, she has been the highest ranking Argentinian official in the ABAC Secretariat. At present, Elena is the secretary of ABAC, and from 76 to 92, she worked in the research and development area of the Argentine National Atomic Energy Commission, participating in nuclear fuel cycle and safeguards activities. Later on, she worked at the Nuclear Regulatory Authority of Argentina, also in safeguards. As the head of the ARN's Nuclear Affairs and Institutional Communication Department, she participated in the ABAC Commission and in the binational nuclear cooperation committees with Brazil. Part of the Argentine delegation of the IAEA Board of Governors and the General Conference, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, and other forums. From 2009 to 2012, she was the vice president of the IRN Board of Directors, and from 2012 to 2013, she had the position of chairperson of the IRN Board. So without any further ado, a warm welcome to you, Elena, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Eva. Hello, everyone. I thank WiN for Peace and especially Eva for the invitation to this event. I am here in the headquarters of ABAC with two colleagues, Ana Maria Rausch and Sonia Fernandez Moreno, the two officers, Brazilian and Argentine planning and evaluation officers of ABAC. ABAC is the result of a process of generating mutual trust between Argentina and Brazil. The process begins in 1980 when Argentina and Brazil signed a cooperation agreement for the development and application of peaceful use of nuclear energy. This agreement establishes the necessary condition for a reciprocal knowledge of both nuclear programs through an exchange of information and consultation. The first milestone of this process was the formation of the Standing Committee of Nuclear Policy in 1985, which established measures to increase confidence and transparency. Among other measures, the visits of both presidents to sensitive facilities in both countries and other technical visits of experts. After several president declarations, in 1990, it was decided to establish a common system of accounting and control of nuclear materials based on mutual and cross inspections. And finally, on July 1991, the agreement between Argentina and Brazil for the exclusive peaceful use of nuclear energy was signed. The bilateral agreement established a regional safeguard system independent of both countries. This reciprocal control system is an innovation within the non-proliferation regime, and until now there is no other system on this type in the world. In this framework, ABAC is created with the full attributes of an international organization, independent of Argentina and Brazil, to apply in both countries a regional safeguard system. ABAC mission is well defined in the text of the bilateral agreement. To verify that all nuclear materials in all nuclear activities in both countries are used exclusively for peaceful purposes, and to apply and administer the Common System of Nuclear Materials Accounting and Control, or SCCC. The SCCC is a set of safeguards procedures applicable to all nuclear materials in all nuclear activities within the jurisdictions or in the territories of Argentina and Brazil. One purpose for the creation of the SCCC was providing uniformity to the safeguard procedures applied in Argentina and Brazil. One of the strengths of the regional safeguard system is the cross-inspection system, through which Brazilian inspectors verify Argentine nuclear facilities and vice versa. The human capital is another of APAC's strengths. Our officers are senior level and come from the nuclear activities and safeguard sectors of both countries. I want to highlight that a crucial factor for ABAC's success has been the political commitment and continued support that both countries have given, both in human and financial results. I also would like to remark that ABAC does not replace the national authority of each country, National Regulatory Authority in Argentina and National Nuclear Energy Commission in Brazil. They continue to fulfill their mission and function in terms of safeguards established by the law of each of the two countries, and applicably only in the territory of each one. ABAC maintains constant communication with the national authorities to coordinate the inspection plan activities and to negotiate the approach to be applied in each facility. Our agency. Yes. Our agency has a simple structure: a governing body, the Commission, and an executive body, the Secretariat. The Commission established the technical and political course for the activities of the Secretariat and has 4 members, 2 for Argentina and 2 for Brazil. The Secretariat is responsible for the performance of the activities required for the application of the SSC on the basis of the guidelines established by the Commission of ABAC. The Secretariat also represents ABAC before the Argentine and Brazilian national authorities. Each one of the technical sectors of ABAC is chaired by an Argentine and a Brazilian officers, and the 2 secretaries rotate annually in the responsibility of heading the agency. In total, there are 12 ABAC officers, including the institutional, administrative, financial sector. Of course, 6 of each nationality. I would like to highlight very especially that the 2 countries, beyond providing the necessary human and financial resources for the operation of ABAC, must ensure their institutional autonomy at all times. The independence of ABAC actions with respect to both countries is a crucial factor for the credibility of the regional system. The annual inspection plan is drawn up based on ABAC's safeguard goals and objectives, and also on the operational and design information provided by both countries. This annual plan of inspection is coordinated with the EAA as provided for the quadripartite agreement. ABAC has approximately 15 inspectors for each country. These inspectors are not permanent members of the Secretariat, although they are considered officers for the duration of the safeguard mission for which they are summoned. The inspectorate has been carrying out verification mission almost daily in Argentina and Brazil. So we have faced a great challenge during the COVID-19 pandemic. We set ourselves the direction of continuing to chart the objective of our mandate, in addition to complying with the prevention measures that both countries were adopting. ABAC carried out inspection at 75 nuclear facilities, 50 in Argentina and 25 in Brazil. The facilities cover the entire fuel cycle, including uranium enrichment and power and research reactors. Some of these installations are in their design phase and others are under construction. ABAC also inspects research and development laboratories that use nuclear material under the agreements. ABAC, Argentina, Brazil, and the agency signed a comprehensive safeguard agreement on December 1991, the so-called Tripartite Agreement, which entered into force in March 1994. The Quadripartite Agreement is based in bilateral agreement and contains well-defined provision on coordination and cooperation between IAEA and ABAC. In particular, envision that the two agencies will cooperate and minimize duplication of activities, but at the same time, reach independent conclusions. A document titled Guidelines for the Coordination of Activities between the IAEA and ABAC established the basis for carrying out shown activities in the areas of inspection, common use of containment and surveillance equipment, calibration guidelines, and the shared use of portable measurement equipment. Since the implementation of the Quadripartite Agreement, both ABAC and IAEA had made a great coordination effort, and the good results obtained in the coordination of activities reflect the high level of understanding and cooperation achieved by both organizations. Finally, the bilateral agreement constitutes a milestone in the peaceful use of nuclear energy, and is a decisive non-proliferation tool between these two countries, Argentina and Brazil, with advanced nuclear programs on the first nuclear weapons-free zone. The Quadripartite Agreement establishes a framework for the relationship between IAEA and ABAC. It establishes that each agency should reach independent conclusions and should work together as much as possible, avoiding unnecessary duplication of efforts, especially ABAC efforts. IAEA and ABAC cooperation and coordination in the field of safeguards along these 31 years have been remarkable. But of course, there are always opportunities to optimize cooperation. ABAC is firmly committed to continue to promote mechanisms and means by which IAEA staffers can make full use of the finest and conclusion of this regional mechanism, ABAC, following the letter and the spirit of the Quadripartite Agreement. And a steady expansion of the nuclear programs of the two countries presents new opportunities and challenges to ABAC. Well, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Elena. That was very interesting. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here today and to give us this presentation on ABAC and how it works. And it looks a little bit complicated at first sight, but it makes a lot of sense now after you have explained how it works. And please, all of you, note the correct spelling of ABAC. It's first is one B and double C, not the other way around as it was on my presentation. So my apologies for that. Thank you very much, Elena. And let's go to the next presentation, which will be by our WiN for Peace member Agostina Serrano, who will talk about national safeguards, in particular also about how it works how the system works between Argentina and ABAC. So first of all, let me introduce Agostina for those of you who do not know her. Agostina is responsible for the export control section within the Non-Proliferation Politics Division of the Nuclear Regulatory Authority of Argentina. She's a senior safeguards analyst, and she is involved in safeguards activities related to ABAC, the IAEA, and the quadripartite agreement. She's also an alternate member of the National Control Commission of Sensitive Exports and War Material, and responsible for the Security and Non-Proliferation Committee of WiN Argentina. Agostina holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, and her Master in International Studies is in progress. So thank you very much, Agostina, for taking the time to prepare this presentation, and we look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you, Eva. Thank you for the introduction. And I will show you a short presentation about the implementation of safeguards at the national level. And I'm going to use the Argentine experience to illustrate some of the key elements that I'm going to address. So a national safeguards infrastructure is built on the foundation of state's legal and regulatory framework, providing for oversight and management of nuclear material and activities. The legal framework is established by international safeguards agreement and other obligations that the country has assumed in the matter, including the national legislation. The regulatory framework refers to laws and regulations which establish requirements regarding nuclear material possession, handling, use, import, and export. This framework should include the following elements: laws and regulations to control and oversee the use of nuclear material and nuclear-related activities, the assignment of responsibilities for safeguards activities, and the granting of legal authority to perform them to an independent state or regional authority responsible for safeguards implementation, the SRA. The design and implementation of an effective state or regional system of accounting for and control of nuclear material, the SIC, and the creation of an effective communication mechanism between the state and the safeguards agency. And of course, the implementation of procedures and practices necessary to facilitate information gathering, timely reporting, and in-field verifications. In particular, I would like to focus on two definitions, SRA and SSAC. And yes, in safeguards we use a lot of acronyms, but I will explain them. The SRA is the authority established at the national or regional level to ensure and facilitate the implementation of safeguards in a state or a state of origin. It exercises regulatory oversight and control functions on nuclear material, facilities, and nuclear-related activities in the country, and also acts as an interface with the safeguards agency. The main responsibilities of the SRA are to establish and execute a regulatory framework, to establish and maintain an SSAC, and related to the implementation of international safeguards to provide the required information and access for inspection, and of course to cooperate with the agencies. To that end, the key elements the SRA will need are licensing. I think it's one of the most important tools for a regulatory authority to ensure that all nuclear material and activities are under the state regulatory control. National inspections and audits, the SRA should conduct them to ensure compliance with conditions of the license or authorization, to ensure that accountancy and control measures are adequate, and to verify the correctness and completeness of information submitted by licenses. And then the enforcement. The SRA should be empowered to prescribe sanctions in the case of non-compliance and to take or initiate enforcement actions. The SSAC or SRAC refers to the national or regional system under which the state or the regional authority accounts for and controls nuclear material. It comprises the elements necessary for a state to control and report its nuclear material inventory, including nuclear material and accounting and reporting systems. As Eva mentioned, under a comprehensive safeguards agreement with the IAEA, the state is required to establish and maintain a system of accounting for and control of nuclear material and also the IAEA in its verification shall take due account of the technical effectiveness of that system. The SSAC should also provide for the establishment of elements for measurement, for accountancy, and for control. Some examples I want to mention are a measurement system for determination of quantities of nuclear material, a system of record and reports, procedures for the submission of reports to the agency, requirements for measurements in accountancy, licensing or authorization of relevant activities, and national inspections. And now I would like to refer to the experience of my country to better illustrate what I have mentioned so far. Argentina has 50 facilities under and other locations under safeguards, including MPPs, research reactors, fuel fabrication, conversion, and enrichment facilities, which are all run by state-owned companies. Regarding the legal framework, Argentina has two safeguards agreements in force: the agreement with Brazil, the bilateral agreement that established the ABAC, as mentioned by Elena, and the qualified agreement signed by Argentina, Brazil, the IAEA, and the ABAC for the application of safeguards by both agencies in each country, which establish provisions similar to those included in a comprehensive safeguards agreement. And at the national level, we have a Nuclear Activity Act promulgated in 1997 that gives a transparent view of the nuclear non-proliferation system in Argentina, while stating that the mentioned international commitments must be considered during nuclear policy formulation and execution. This National Nuclear Activity Act also created an independent regulatory body with competencies and responsibilities on non-proliferation matters, and empower it to fulfill its mission and as the state authority responsible for safeguards implementation, the SRA, in Argentina, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Authority, the ARN. And the ARN established the Argentine SSAC through a regulatory standard that sets the requirements and procedures applicable to nuclear material and other nuclear-related materials, equipments, and information to ensure with a reasonable degree of confidence that such elements are not diverted for any unauthorized purpose, and that nuclear activities are performed in compliance with all the international undertakings and commitments assumed by the country. As general rule, no one can receive, use, process, produce, store, transfer, or possess nuclear material or other nuclear-related facilities or equipment without the proper license or authorization granted by the ARN. In addition to managing the SSAC, the ARN counts on its own technical analytical capabilities and has a staff of safeguards inspector and analysts who carry out national inspections and other related activities. The ARN also coordinates international inspections with ABAC at the IAEA in the country, facilitating the implementation of safeguards and providing technical support to the agencies when necessary. Finally, and to enforce compliance, the ARN has the power of applying sanctions, which are graduated according to the severity of the case. They can go from warnings to revoking the license, for example. So we can see that there is a legal and regulatory framework in which an SRA, the ARN, has the legal authority and the necessary elements to fulfill its function and manage the SSAC effectively and efficiently. So I hope you found this short review helpful and interesting. And of course, feel free to ask any question you have during our Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agustina. So that was a very nice overview, both about how a national regulatory authority works and how your regulatory authority works in respect to the IAEA and to ABAC interactions, etc. So thank you very much for that interaction of yours. So without any further ado, let's go to our fourth speaker, who is Ms. Ana Rita Lopez Ramos from Euratom. Hello, Ana Rita.
Hi, everybody.
let me briefly introduce you. So Anna-Rita holds a diploma in physics and a PhD in nuclear physics in the applications of material science. She's the deputy head of unit at the Euratom Safeguards Directorate of the European Commission, Directorate General for Energy, in the unit dealing with policy, quality, and technology. She's experienced in the analysis and development of policies in the framework of Euratom safeguards and in the implementation of international agreements between the Euratom community and third states of the IAEA. So thank you very much for participating in our webinar, Anna-Rita, and we look forward to your presentation on the regional aspect as performed by Euratom within the European Union. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Eva. First, thanks, Sonia, for thinking of me and giving my name to this specific webinar. Thanks, Eva, for putting it all together. I just have a question because I've had a few difficulties connecting. Eva, will you put up the presentation or should I share my screen?
If you can share your screen, please do so. If it doesn't work, then we can also run it. But
all right, then I will try to share my screen.
Share it. Yes.
Okay, here we go. Share. Let me know.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
You can see. Excellent. Now let's see if I can give this presentation. Okay, excellent. All right, so let's try to keep within the allotted time. Things have been really very timely, so I'll try not to derail the entire presentation. I have more slides than are good for me and good for you, but okay, bear with me, we will go as far as we can. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so I will talk a bit about what is Euratom, how do Euratom safeguards actually work, and our cooperation with the agency, and finally, if I have still some time, some facts and figures about Euratom safeguards. So let's begin at the beginning with the question, what is Euratom? I'm not quite sure what our audience is, how many of you, I know that there are 29 to 31 of you, but I'm sure you come from all over the place. So you're not necessarily acquainted with the legal framework as it exists in Europe. So before I even talk about Euratom, I like to talk about what is the European Union. Because the European Union is a very unique economic, political, and social unit between 27 European countries. We have a flag, which you may be aware of, with 12 stars over a blue background, which is evocative of the 12 work of Hercules. So there is not one star per country, just to explain, there are just only 12 stars. So the flag doesn't change every time somebody comes in or out of the Union. We have a day that we celebrate as Europe Day, which is the 9th of May, where we celebrate what is known as the Schuman Declaration. So one of the first declarations from a very important political man in Europe about the future of Europe. And this was in the early 50s, so it's a very early declaration, and we celebrate that. And we have a motto, which is united in diversity. As I said, there are 27 countries. We speak 24 official languages, and there are about 340 million people in Europe, in the EU. What is Euratom? Well, Euratom is a community that was established. Euratom means European Atomic Energy Community, and it was a community established in the early 50s. The European Union itself is originally, or has a legal origin in two treaties. The treaty that established the European Atomic Energy Community, Euratom, and the treaty that established the European Economic Community, which is what we know as the EEC. But at origin, there were two treaties, and one of them established the community, the European Atomic Energy Community. And the objective of the community was, and this is in my slide, to contribute to the raising of the standard of living of the people in the member states. By how? By creating the conditions necessary for the speedy establishment and growth of nuclear industries. So the treaty is a full range of provisions in order to advance the peaceful uses of nuclear energy and to bring forward progress through the use of nuclear energy. The treaty has a number, as I said, of provisions. They give, oh, interesting. I see that there are a number of yellow lines that appear in the slide. I don't know if you see them, I see them, but it's interesting.
Yes, actually for us they are black. We have a black square on the right-hand side and a black one on the top, or a rectangle rather. Yeah.
Interesting. What about now?
Yeah, now one is gone, but it's smaller, and it's moving up.
Okay, I think it's better now.
It's better, but if you can remove them completely, that would be great. But...
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can remove that completely.
Oh, do you want to stop sharing and start sharing again? Maybe that will resolve the problem.
I can stop sharing and then I can share again.
Yeah, now it's still on the top. Anyway, okay, now it's bigger than.
Yeah, because I think what you're seeing really is the screen, whereas
I've never seen, and this is better now. I think we can manage this way.
Okay, this should be as good as it gets. I'm sorry. So, as I was saying, the Euratom community, established by treaty in the early 50s, gives the community, which is the set of states, so it is a supranational entity, gives it a number of powers to act in several areas of nuclear. One area is nuclear safety. Other area is waste management, radiation protection, emergency preparedness and response, in supply of nuclear materials, in international relations, in research and development, but also obviously in nuclear safeguards. And when it comes to nuclear safeguards, the community, the supranational entity, was given the exclusive competence to act in this area, meaning that the states that originated, that agreed to enter this community, give it the power and the obligation to actually ensure that the materials are kept in peaceful use, that they are not diverted from the purposes for which they were declared. So nuclear safeguards is also part of the Euratom Treaty, and it's an exclusive competence of the supranational entity that was created by treaty. So, next slide. So how does this supranational system of safeguards work? Well, the treaty says that the Commission, what is the Commission? The treaty established a legal person, that is the community, and then somebody needed to act for this legal person. So institutions, supranational institutions were created to act on behalf of the community. And one of these institutions was the Commission. Okay. The Commission is also a supranational institution within the European Union that acts like an administration, like a supranational administration, with some tasks that could be seen as tasks of a government, because it also proposes initiatives for legislation. But the Commission, under Euratom, it has the obligation to satisfy itself that in the territory of the member states, ores, source materials, and special fissile materials are not diverted from their intended uses, and that any obligations that we have entered into with third parties, third states or international organizations, that these obligations are complied with. So this is the task of the Commission. This is what the final objective of Euratom safeguards is. So to ensure that materials are not diverted from their intended uses and are kept in peaceful use. That's the objective of Euratom safeguards. And these objectives are written into the treaty, and it's from 1957. So it's before even the non-proliferation treaty. It's 6 months older than the IAEA statute, this particular treaty. So it's really from the very beginning of the peaceful uses of nuclear energy in Europe. What materials are we talking about? Well, basically, there is an article in the treaty that explains which materials need to be safeguarded. And it's basically the same thing as in the chapter, in the Article 20 of the IAEA statute. So we're talking about the same materials with an additional element. Under Euratom, we are also talking about ores. So under Euratom safeguards were not only the, I'm going to call them normal nuclear materials, which are the special fissile materials such as plutonium-239, uranium-233, enriched uranium, or source materials like uranium, natural uranium, or depleted uranium, thorium. So these were obviously, and under Article 20 of the IAEA statute, they are under safeguards, obviously. But for Euratom, since the beginning, ores were also included in the controls. Ores were also part of materials to be safeguarded. So that's one element where we had, let's say, a bigger mandate than the agency since the beginning. Like the IAEA statute, the Euratom Treaty gives the Commission a number of powers and obligations. It has, in its treaty, in the treaty, there are provisions that oblige operators to provide basic technical characteristics, what, for instance, for the agency is known as design information. Under the Euratom language, it's known as basic technical characteristics. So there's an article in the treaty that obliges operators to give the Commission information regarding the basic technical characteristics of the installations. They also need to provide nuclear material, they need to establish a nuclear material accountancy and control system and provide the necessary reports to the Commission. And also the Commission is given the power to send inspectors to do inspections on site to verify if the physical reality, as it has been communicated through the reports and has it on site, as it matches the operating records, is it really there? Does the physical reality actually match the numbers in the books of the operator, in the books of Euratom? So concerning the basic technical characteristics, what the treaty says and what is actually implemented is that all operators provide the Commission with the information that is necessary for safeguards purposes. And in addition, something that's not as clear for instance, for the IAEA, the Commission also must approve techniques to be used for the chemical processing of irradiated materials. Basically translated into simpler terms, this means that if you were setting up a reprocessing installation, not only did you need to communicate the characteristics of your installation, you would also need an authorization for the techniques you would be applying for reprocessing, in the sense that these techniques, this installation could be safeguarded. So the Commission also must approve the techniques for the chemical processing, in the sense that it needs to ensure itself that you can safeguard these installations. Article 79, which is about nuclear material accountancy, says that the Commission, so this entity that acts for the community, they require the operators to maintain operating records, to account for the ores, for the source materials, and for the special fissile materials. And that this requirement also applies in the case of transport. And in addition, that the operators provide reports to the Commission. Not only do they need to have a system, they need to report on that system. There's also regulation. So the treaty describes the main obligations, very much like the IAEA statute describes the main obligations and powers of IAEA. But there's also some more specific legislation within the Euratom community that provides more guidance. So it describes the practical modalities of implementing all these obligations, namely the declaration of basic technical characteristics. So what you need to declare, under which time limit, things related also to the program of activities of the installations. These are also defined in more specific pieces of legislation that is applicable in all countries of the European Union. And it also establishes this lower level regulation. It establishes an accounting system, all the requirements of the necessary accounting system and of the necessary existing operating records. So there is a treaty, it has a number of obligations and it has a number of powers, and then there is more legislation that explains how exactly these obligations need to be met and what exactly needs to be reported to the Commission. And then, of course, the Commission analyzes all this information, and very much like the IAEA, it may and does send inspectors into the territories of the member states, so into the nuclear installations. And our inspectors actually have at all times access to all places and all data and all persons in order to ensure compliance with Article 77, so in order to ensure that nuclear material is not diverted. So they have very large access powers in these installations, and they cannot be delayed or otherwise impeded in the performance of their duties. So not only can we receive information of all sorts, we can also go and verify this information. And so there is a system of inspection that is put in place by a body of inspectors that are officials of the Commission, meaning that there are people that are employed 100% and for life by the Commission for the purposes of conducting these activities. We also have a system very much also like Agustina was describing for her national system. We also have a system of sanctions or infringements. So if in performing our duties, we verify that there has been some deviation, that there have been instances when not all obligations have been met, when accountancy has been less than optimal, when certain information has not been provided, we can act directly against, so the Commission, when I say we, is the Commission, can act directly against member states or nuclear operators through a system of infringement or sanctions. So for instance, we can issue a directive calling the member state to do things, to change the situation that we have observed. And if the member state does not do it, we can bring the member state to the European Union Court of Justice. We have to remind people here that the European Union is a set of institutions, of supranational institutions. So beyond the Commission that has this specific role, in this case of applying safeguards in the European Union, in the Euratom community, there are also other institutions, for instance, that have a role in the interpretation of the treaty and in the correct application of the treaties, namely, for instance, the Court of Justice. So if in applying the treaty and in the remits of the Commission's duties, something is not correct, and for instance, a directive is not followed, we can bring the case to the Court of Justice so that the member state is basically prosecuted in court, and they can apply other sanction measures. So that is one possibility. The Commission in itself can also bring about sanctions, and these sanctions, so we can decide on applying sanctions directly to the operator. So now we're not talking about the member state, we're talking about the operator directly. And these sanctions on the operator, we can have 4 levels of sanctions. One of sanction is a warning. The other is withdrawal, special benefits. Then we can place the operator under administration for a maximum period of 4 months, or we can even go as far as withdrawing the nuclear materials from the operator's possession. So we have had instances, there's a number of case law of warnings and placing under administration as well. So these sanctions do really work in practice, and they are directly aimed at operators. If before we were talking about directives to member states, here the Commission can also sanction operators directly, which is again something where the agency differs from us. We can also issue recommendations to the member states if there is something in their law that is not their national law that is not necessarily aligned with the needs of the treaty or of the obligations of the treaty, we can issue recommendations on how best to change that and how best to align that. So that's also a possibility open to the Commission, the European Commission. So that was about what is Euratom, how does it work? But of course, internationally, we cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency in applying safeguards within the Euratom community. How does that cooperation work? So that's what we're going to see now. So we have, of course, the Euratom community began in the middle of the 50s. And so for almost 20 years, it operated a full system of safeguards under all material in peaceful use within the European Union. But later on, with the signature of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and with which our member states adhered very early on in implementation of Article 3 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, our member states also concluded safeguards agreements with the International Atomic Energy Agency. And because they were part of this community and there was a number of powers already given to this supranational entity, which was the community and the Commission acting for the community itself is part to these agreements. So we have, well, currently we have two agreements with the International Atomic Energy Agency. The Multilateral Safeguards Agreement, which is known as INFCIRC 193, and that's between Euratom, the agency, and the 26 non-nuclear weapon states of the European Union. It entered into force in 1978, and of course it has an additional protocol to which our countries also adhered, which entered into force in 2004. We also have, of course, within the Union, we have a nuclear weapon state, a bona fide nuclear weapon state under the NPT, which is France. So we have a separate voluntary trilateral safeguards agreement, which is known as INFCIRC 290, between Euratom, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and France, the nuclear weapon state France. And this one entered into force in 1981. So within the European Atomic Energy Community, if for Euratom all member states are created equal vis-a-vis our cooperation with the agency, we have two separate modalities. One where we have a comprehensive safeguards agreement in place, which is INFCIRC 193, non-nuclear weapon states of the Union, and one where we have a voluntary safeguards agreement, which is INFCIRC 290 with France. So these are two separate agreements because of the nature of the countries under the NPT. So as I was saying, because when the NPT came into force and when we had to actually enter comprehensive safeguards agreements or safeguards agreements under the NPT, the community already existed and it had regulatory, executive and judicial powers that were specific to the control and applied to the control of nuclear materials. The verification agreements had to be written in a way that they took this into consideration so as not to affect the rights of the different parties, neither the community's rights nor the agency's rights, the International Atomic Energy Agency's rights. And as you've seen also for ABAC and then its quadripartite agreement, one of the main tenets of these agreements has been to avoid unnecessary duplication of safeguards activities. So here as well, though quite a few years before, we have a regional system where the agency and the community are going to share responsibility in the implementation of safeguards in a way to avoid unnecessary duplication of efforts, of course, coming to their own independent conclusions, but doing so in a way in which they cooperate, in which they don't duplicate efforts, and in which they try to reduce invasiveness to nuclear operators. So, in fact, in both the INFCIRC 193 and 290, there is a very specific protocol that specifies the condition for cooperation between the agency and Euratom, and it very much defines details to avoid duplication of efforts from transmission of information to scheduling of inspections to conduct of inspections. For instance, one of the interesting things it brings forward, which is specific, is it establishes a liaison committee that meets at different levels so as to allow alignment in procedures between the two institutions. So it's a cooperation system that is in fact written into the safeguards agreement, into the protocol. It was later modified for the purposes of efficiency in the 90s, in 1992, through an agreement that we call the New Partnership Approach, which is written under GovInf 654. And it's an agreement on how we conduct work together between the agency and Euratom. Basically, again, avoiding duplication of efforts by agreeing on safeguards approaches, on the implementation of safeguards at different installations, working with agreed joint instruments, doing joint training and sharing analytical capabilities. So all in the interest of efficiency and effectiveness of safeguards. So that's a bit on how we and the agency interact within the Euratom community, which is slightly different from the situation elsewhere. So finally, I can talk to you, I think, about facts and figures, because it's not very late, is it? No, it's not very late. We're just 1 minute.
I think about 5 minutes left, Adarita.
Okay, so we're going to be just fine. So we have around 700 installations to which in our books in the European Union. So in the Euratom communities, a lot of installations. For a number of them, they are under something that's known for us as the catch-all MBA. So very, very small installations. They are grouped together, and their accountancy and the analysis or what goes on there is grouped together under one big chapeau of one MBA. So that's why, even though we have 700 installations, more or less, we're listing here only around less than 600 safeguards conclusions. So every year, for every installation in the EU, we take stock of what has happened during the year. We've seen how they have been reporting. We have taken stock of the inspections that we did on site, of what has been observed, and we come to a conclusion as the installation complied with its obligations, is positive. Are there anything to comment that's positive with comments, or is it negative? Is there some element where we are less than happy about how things have been handled at installation? Normally, this may be because some information was late or was not provided, or because we have deemed that certain elements of nuclear accountancy were not optimal, for instance, and then you can have a negative conclusion. But we do this for about 575. That was 2020, 571 in 2021 places within the Union. We deploy almost 3,000 person day of inspection. So we have a lot of visits, of inspections to sites, so with several people and then lengthy inspections. Of course, we have a number of countries that have a large nuclear fuel cycle with many installations. So of course, this requires many people to do the inspections. It requires a certain amount of effort. We have also a lot of material. We have around 500,000 tons of nuclear material on the safeguards. And of this material, we have managed to physically verify almost 100%. So that's what this figure here means, that 99.95% of all civil nuclear material in the EU has been verified. So that means that we have physically been at these installations to conduct physical verification, namely physical inventory verification. And we have also, when we see that there is a negative safeguards conclusion, we do a follow-up process. So we engage with the nuclear operator directly to understand what are the steps necessary to change the situation for the better. And we come up with a plan that we both agree on, and we follow up on the implementation of this plan. But if things don't work out as much as we expect them to work out, then you may this may lead to sanctions or infringements, and we have done that. For instance, in 2020, we didn't do it, but in 2021, we had one procedure for infringement, which was a warning, because there was one situation where we were less than happy about the level of control. So that's it. So that's Euratom safeguards at a glance. Thank you. That's all I have for you. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm sorry for all the hassle with the presentation. That's it.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Anna-Rita. I can see, so your Euratom safeguards are really strong, and you have a lot of strong tools, much stronger than the IAE, I can see in some respects. So that was very interesting. Thank you very much. Before we continue with the Q&A and the quiz, can I just ask all of you to open your videos and let's take a group photo, ladies? So please show your beautiful faces. Remove my glasses. And Agostina, you tell us when you are ready. Or Florencia, who's making the photo.
Just a few seconds, so everyone turn on the camera. And that's it.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. So thanks again to all the speakers. That was a very good session. I think all of our participants should have now a good idea about how safeguards work at both the national, the regional, and the international level. So let's now open the floor for questions and answers. So either you raise your hand and or open your microphone. You can talk directly into the microphone if you have questions, or you can also put them in the chat. Any questions from anybody? Was everything so clear that there are no questions, or you don't have any questions beyond what was discussed? Okay, so if there are no questions, let me start with asking a question to the ladies from ABAC, to Elena. What are the technical challenges that ABAC is currently facing, both currently now and also in the short and medium term? What do you foresee? What are your challenges?
Thank you, Eva. The main technical challenges for ABAC has to do with the expansion of nuclear activities in both countries. Argentina and Brazil has increased the capacity of some facilities, including enrichment uranium facilities, and there is under construction and development different types of reactors. For example, the multi-purpose reactor with high neutron flux, or modular reactor, and reactor for naval propulsion. Within this framework, ABAC in the near future has to face the development innovative safeguard approach, which take into account the latest technical developments and the safeguard criteria. On the other hand, in both countries, in some existing and future installation, there are parameters and data that the countries consider strategic sensitive. So the challenge for ABAC is to achieve a robust safeguard scheme as this installation, but preserving this data. So we are facing, we are looking at the cooperation with the IAEA should continue closely and be highest. So this is the first challenge, to develop innovative safeguard approach for a special installation. But we have also challenge. The quadripartite agreement establishes that ABAC inspectors are the communication interface between agency inspector and national authorities during the inspection. So we have a new generation of inspectors. So another challenge for ABAC is to keep this new generation of inspectors duly trained, not only for technical procedures and activities, but also that they continue to exercise appropriately the role designated by the quadripartite agreement. So training of new developed innovative SERGA approach and to maintain training the inspectors team is our near future challenges. So
Thank you very much, Elena. That brings me to my question to Agustina about capacity building. Agustina, so what do you think about how important is capacity building at the national level and training of your staff?
Okay, thank you, Ivan. I believe that the effectiveness of the SSAC depends on the large extent on the skills, knowledge, and expertise of the safeguards personnel, and of course the licenses involved in safeguard-related activities. So in particular, the WiN has always had a broad commitment to training and consider it essential for building competencies in the various angles of safeguard implementation. For example, in safeguards personnel participating in general training activities, international training courses, and has access to different degrees offered by the Regional Training Center for Latin America, administered by the WiN. But it also recognizes, the need to strengthen stakeholders' engagement to assure a clear understanding of their safeguards obligation and responsibilities. In that sense, the WiN periodically offers a safeguards training course for facility operators and on-demand workshops designed to meet the specific needs to different audiences. I can tell you that these activities have been key to ensuring compliance, improving communications, and building close and fruitful cooperation with relevant stakeholders.
Okay, thank you, Agustina. Actually, we have also a question regarding to training, which came to me directly. And it is, does ABAC offer training for new inspectors, and how does one get involved? How can one join such training? Who can answer this?
Yes, Eva, thank you. ABAC offers training for our inspectors. Special procedures and accounting procedures. Well, for a year we have an average of 4 or 5 training courses in both countries, because there are some special procedures for installation of Brazil, so the Argentine inspector had to be training these procedures and vice versa. In some cases, we offer training also to EIA inspectors in special use of some equipment. For example, equipment developed especially for enrichment plants. So ABAC offers training also to EIA inspectors.
Excellent. So how can somebody from this audience here who has the necessary background, how could they join such training? Can I refer them to you or to Sonia maybe to advise them how they could join the training for inspectors at ABAC? Or who can join?
¿Quién puede participar de los cursos?
Yeah, do they have to be part of the regulatory body of each country, or how do they join?
No, up to now, only the inspectors, the resource inspectors are choose and select by the 2 countries. The 2 countries offers inspector for Argentina and for Brazil. We have 45, 50 inspectors per country. But the course is only for inspectors. Up to now, we have no servers or something like that.
So
But in
that's
the future,
to
I don't
become
know.
national inspectors.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I hope that has answered the question. So thank you for those answers. And let me just direct one at Anna-Rita. So Anna-Rita, maybe you can tell us more about how the collaboration between the IAE and Euratom works. Anna-Rita, I can see your raised hand.
Yeah, I also wanted to join in on the training. In fact, we have a permanent body of inspectors. We are around 300 people, including technical staff here in Luxembourg. And we have a permanent body of inspectors, and most of the training is in-house training done also with the IAEA. We share training. So we participate in their training and we offer places in our training to their inspectors. This being said, this, just like for ABAC, the training is for inspectors that are meant to have this professional activity with our institutions, be it with the agency or be it with us. But this being said, there are some courses that are provided by the European Commission, namely the Joint Research Center, on safeguards, which are open to a wider audience, and that is the case of the DSR course. So there is possibility for training specifically on safeguards beyond what obviously is also training for provided by the agency on state systems of accountancy and control and similar. But there is this training out there also possible for Euratom for inspectors, but for safeguards, which is akin to part of the inspector training. So let's put it this way: if people are interested in having some safeguards training, there are possibilities. One of them is ISARDA. There is also a nuclear safeguards master's course that was offered. It was partially financed by the European Commission for which the agency provided a lot of support, and the number of trainers also for this, of teachers for this course, the European Commission also provided. And there is a possibility of training in the area of safeguards that has been opened recently. So it's a master's by the Polytechnico of Madrid in the remit of a platform, a European platform on nuclear, basically on maintaining nuclear capacity and nuclear training. So that's it, which is called NN. So I wanted to put this out there. This also exists for the non-professional. So
yeah, thank you. And
so
by the way,
IAEA, yeah, my question.
IAEA also has a lot of training for safeguards inspectors. So in case you are interested in becoming IAEA safeguards inspectors, the IAEA, I think they have two rounds of calls for inspectors per year. And if you have at least 7 years of experience working at the nuclear facility, at the national regulator in the nuclear field, look at the requirements and apply. I think the IAEA is looking for a wide range of experiences. I mean, nobody will have all the required training and background. So you learn on the job, and it's a very interesting job, and it takes you to a lot of interesting places. So if you are interested in that, I encourage you to keep an eye on the IAEA website of the vacancies. So I think we have exhausted our Q&A time. So let's quickly move to the quiz section. Yes. So I hope you're still attentive, because now we are going to launch our first ever quiz. And I invite I think Florencia is going to launch it, or Agostina. So we have the first question. And please just, you will see yes or no. So the first question is cobalt-60 material subject to IAEA safeguards? Okay, one person has answered. And what about the depleted uranium used for shielding of cobalt-60 sources? Is that subject to IAEA safeguards? I can see several people here, so please click on the button. We need more answers. I'm looking at the time. I give you 10 more seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So first question, is cobalt-60 material subject to IAEA safeguards? If you remember, under IAEA safeguards, you have source material and special fissionable material that is subject to safeguards. Any other radioactive material is not subject to safeguards. So the first answer is no. Whereas for depleted uranium, it's classified as source material, which is subject to safeguards. So that one, yes, would be subject to safeguards. So for first answer is no, the second answer is yes. So you got it almost right. So let me share the results. Should I press on that button or? Okay, let's go to the next question. So which of the following are key responsibilities of the state or the regional authority responsible for safeguards implementation, the so-called SRA? To exercise regulatory oversight of a nuclear material, to establish and maintain an effective SSAC or RSAC, or to facilitate the implementation of international safeguards, or all of the above? Take your time. I give you 10 more seconds. 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so I think it's all of the above. The SRA needs to take care of all those 3 aspects. So in case you clicked all 3, then it's correct, or if you clicked all the above. Thank you. The next one. I press share results. Okay, and hold. So the third question is related to Euratom safeguards, and Anna Rita mentioned this very explicitly. What nuclear material is under Euratom safeguards? Ores, source material, and special fissile material. Only nuclear material with a purity and composition suitable for enrichment or fuel fabrication, or all forms of isotopes of plutonium, thorium, and uranium. She mentioned this specifically, which is actually different from the IAEA. So yes, I can see right clicks. I give you 10 more seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so actually it's the right answer is ore, source, and special fissile material. So the distinction with the IAEA is that Euratom also safeguards ores, which are explicitly excluded from IAEA safeguards. Okay, thank you. Next question. Should ABAC and the IAEA duplicate inspection efforts in the field? Yes or no? Next question. Should ABAC and the IAEA duplicate inspection efforts in the field? Who has an idea of that? Should they duplicate or not? Yes or no? I cannot see any answers. You can answer with a yes or a no. You just click yes or no for the first question. Okay. And the second question is, should the states parties, ABAC and the IAEA, cooperate to ensure effective, efficient safeguards? So let me give you 10 more seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so should they duplicate inspection efforts? So I think the optimum is no, they should not. They should be complementary, but they should not really duplicate their efforts, as was said during the presentation. And should they cooperate? Yes, they should cooperate. So you got it almost right. So next one. I think we have one more question. In states with a CSA in force, do IAEA inspectors have access to any locations on the nuclear site? Careful, with a CSA in force, not with an AP in force. Do they have access anywhere on the site? Remember my presentation and remember the Iraq case. There's no AP in force, just the standard CSA. And in states with an additional protocol in force, what is the notification period for triggering complementary access if IAEA inspectors are already on the nuclear site? Is it 1 hour or is it 2 hours? Or is it 24 hours? If they are already on the site, so remember, you are there as an inspector, do you have to wait for 1 hour? Do you have to wait for 2 hours? Or do you have to sleep on the site and to wait for your access? Just think about it. So let me give you 10 more seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so you were not quite decided on the first one. It's 50-50. Actually, under a CSA, inspectors only have access to a certain location on the site. If you remember, the site was this big area on the Tuwaitha site in Iraq, but there was just a very small part of that site where the IAEA could go under the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. Whereas with an additional protocol, they would have access to anywhere on that site. That is very important to distinguish. So the correct answer is no in the first case. And in the second case, if inspectors are already on the site and they want to trigger complementary access, so nobody clicked 1 hour, that's correct. And the correct answer is 2 hours because they are already on the site, so that you can't expect them to sleep on the site and wait for 24 hours. It's just 2 hours notification period. So 70% got that right as well. So I think we have one more, right? So that was a good turnaround.
That's it.
That's it? Okay, so okay, that was exciting. This is the first time we've had this polling, and I think it makes it quite interesting. So thank you very much for participating in that. I would like to say a big thank you to all the presenters, for all the panelists who presented today and for the background work they undertook. And also I would like to thank Agostina, Florencia and their team for supporting us in the background, in addition to Agostina also being a speaker. And we are working on enhancing our webinars, so expect some more enhancements in the future. It's not easy to conduct such seminars, but I'm really grateful for the great team we have working in the background. So thank you very much. And I hope all participants found this interesting. And if you have any feedback, please let us know. Just send us an email. I think you have my email address in the presentation and elsewhere. Without any further ado, thank you very much to South America. Thank you very much to Brussels. Thank you very much to Argentina, Brazil, and wherever else you are in the world. And we look forward to the next session. Thank you, ladies. Bye-bye.